I am not a copy of someone else's vision. I am not living a life designed by admiration. I am the author of my own blueprint, and what I build will stand because it was built on ground that belongs to me. There is a form of failure that looks nothing like failure from the outside. It looks like progress. It looks like ambition. It looks like someone doing all the right things. But underneath, the foundation is borrowed. The vision is borrowed. The goals are borrowed. And when the weight of real life presses down on that structure, it collapses. Not because the person lacked effort, but because they built a house on land they did not own. This is what happens when you construct your life on someone else's identity. You see a person you admire. You study their habits. You copy their strategy. You imitate their language. You adopt their goals as your own. And for a while, it works. The borrowed blueprint produces borrowed results. But those results never feel like yours. There is always a gap between what you have achieved and what you feel you deserve. That gap is not imposter syndrome. That gap is the distance between who you are pretending to be and who you actually are. The spiritual principle is ancient. A tree planted in another tree's soil will grow, but it will never bear its own fruit. It will always produce a version of what the original tree was meant to produce. And eventually, because the roots were never its own, a single storm will be enough to pull it out of the ground. Your identity must be yours, not inherited from a mentor you idolize, not copied from a speaker you follow, not borrowed from a lifestyle you saw on a screen. Yours, discovered, chosen, and declared from the inside. Now let me bring this directly to money. Because borrowed identity is the hidden cause behind some of the most painful financial failures people experience. A person sees someone they admire building wealth through real estate. They do not ask whether real estate fits their own skills, their own temperament, their own financial position. They simply copy. They take on debt they do not understand. They enter a market they have not studied. They make decisions based on someone else's conviction, not their own knowledge. And when it falls apart, they do not blame the strategy. They blame themselves. They say, "I am not good enough." But that was never the problem. The problem was that they were executing someone else's plan with someone else's identity, and their own instincts were screaming the entire time that something did not fit. This pattern repeats everywhere. A person starts a business because someone they follow started a business, not because they identified a problem they were uniquely positioned to solve. A person invests in cryptocurrency because a person they trust invested in cryptocurrency, not because they understood the asset, the risk, or the timeline. A person adopts a financial lifestyle, the car, the watch, the apartment, because it matches the image of the person they are trying to become. But the image was never theirs. It was borrowed, and borrowed images require borrowed money to maintain. This is the financial trap of borrowed identity. You end up spending money to maintain a version of yourself that was never real. Every purchase becomes a performance. Every financial decision becomes an act of imitation. And the deeper you go, the harder it becomes to stop, because stopping would mean admitting that the life you built was not yours. That admission feels like failure, but it is not failure. It is the first honest moment you have had in years, and honesty is the only foundation that holds. The wealthy do not copy, they study. There is a critical difference. Studying means extracting principles and applying them through the filter of your own identity. Copying means skipping the filter entirely and hoping that someone else's path will work for someone else's person. It never does. The principles are universal. The application must be personal. The moment you skip that personalization, you are building on borrowed ground. A young man once followed every move of an entrepreneur he deeply admired. He read the same books. He woke up at the same hour. He repeated the same affirmations. He started a business in the same industry. For 2 years, he did everything his mentor had done. And for 2 years, nothing worked the way it was supposed to. He went to see the man he had been imitating and told him everything. He expected encouragement. Instead, the man asked him one question. He said, "Why did you choose this industry?" The young man paused. He realized he had no answer that belonged to him. He had chosen it because the man in front of him had chosen it, not because it matched his own skills, not because it solved a problem he cared about, not because it aligned with anything inside him. He had built a business on someone else's reason, and a business without a personal reason has no roots. The mentor told him something that changed the direction of his life. He said, "You studied my moves, but you skipped the most important one. The first thing I did before I built anything was sit in silence and ask myself what problem I was born to solve. Not what problem looked profitable. Not what problem someone else was solving successfully. What problem was mine?" That question took me 6 months to answer, but once I answered it, every decision became clear. You never asked that question. You borrowed my answer, and my answer was never meant to be yours. The young man went home and stopped everything. He closed the business. He sat with the discomfort of having no direction, and for the first time in years, he asked himself an honest question. What do I actually care about? What problem do I see that others ignore? What am I willing to build, even if no one I admire has built it before? The answers came slowly, but they were his, and when he finally built again, the structure held, not because the strategy was better, because the identity beneath it was real. Here is the practice. I call it the origin test. Take every major financial commitment you currently hold, your business, your investments, your career path, your biggest recurring expenses, and ask one question about each. Did I choose this because it came from inside me, or because I saw someone else choose it first? Be ruthless with the answer. If the honest answer is, I chose it because someone I admire chose it, that does not mean you must abandon it immediately, but it means you must now do the work of making it yours. Study it with your own eyes. Test it against your own values. Ask whether it serves the life you are building or the life you are performing. Any commitment that survives the origin test with an honest yes belongs to you. Keep building on it. Any commitment that only survives because of borrowed conviction deserves a second, harder look. Because borrowed conviction is the most expensive thing you will ever carry. It costs you money, time, and years of building in the wrong direction. Today, I ask you to do one thing. Take the single biggest financial decision you are currently living with, whether it is your career, your business, or your largest investment, and complete this sentence honestly. I chose this because... If the sentence ends with the reason that belongs to you, you are on solid ground. If it ends with the name or the image of someone else, you now know what needs to be examined. That examination is not a crisis. It is the beginning of ownership. And ownership is the only foundation that does not crack. I am not a copy. I am not performing a life I saw someone else live. I am building on identity I discovered, examined, and chose for myself. My path does not need to look like anyone else's path. It needs to be mine. And because it is mine, it will hold. I am the original, and what I build from that truth will stand longer than anything I could ever borrow. If this reached you, Like this video, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe. Drop a comment. Tell me what shifted. This is only the beginning.